Probably one of the big ones is they're coming in to find out how much it's going to cost. So I will go through what have you been assessed for, what level. So there's 8 levels at Support at Home now since 1 November. And for anybody who was assessed between 13th of September 24 through to the 31st of October 25, they might be on the 1 to 4 transition old home care package. So for those people, I go through and I'll say to them, okay, what have you been assessed for? Have you been assessed under these 3 categories? So when you get assessed as clinical, independence, or everyday living.
You're listening to Outreach. Thanks for your company wherever you are tuning in right around the world. My name is Brian Peel, and we are coming to you from the studios here at Kindred in the heart of the western suburbs in Yarraville. My second to IC, our marketing guru, Marcus Cook, also working tirelessly in the background. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll give you a quick wave. G'day. Thank you so much for supporting Outreach. You can get in touch with us on social media. It is Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. So we are all over the socials, and you can catch up on all of our past episodes as well. If you are a bit of a podcaster and you want to listen to us on the fly, you can do that. Head over to Mixcloud and you just type in Outreach, and it is Aged Care and Disability. It is a show dedicated to aged care, disability, and it is the power of community connection, thanks to Gratitude Home Care and I Help Disability Services. If you want to get in touch, if you do have some content you want to share, if you are in the sector in aged care disability and you want to share your story, you can hit me up on the email. It is brian@gihc.com.au, or you can reach out to Marcus on marcus@ihds.com.au. Time for our special guest, a very special interview we have today, and my aged care changes and all types of things going on in the aged care sector as well as in the disability sector. But one of our most important organisations in the country is Services Australia. And today we welcome a very special guest into the studio. I have Daniel here with me. Daniel is an aged care specialist officer, and he is an officer looking after the areas of particularly the northern suburbs of Victoria. Welcome to Outreach, Daniel.
Thank you, Brian. Great to be here.
Thanks for coming in. How's things going?
Very busy, but very good. Yes, but very satisfying to. We've gone through a little bit of a rush since November, but it's starting to settle down now, and people are getting more focused with the changes. Yeah,
I think it is settled down a little bit. I think a lot of people were nervous about what's coming, what's going to happen, and all those types of things. But I feel it really has settled down quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you found yourself, now that things have settled down, like there's sort of more engagement on your end, or?
Yeah, I would probably say before the changes,
Yeah.
I was 90% permanent aged care and 10% support at home. Now it's flipped. It's definitely on the majority side of support at home since the changes have gone through, but I expect that to start to even out a little bit and go back to a new level playing field shortly.
And it's nice that it has leveled out and people are more comfortable in the sector. And as anything is, there are, lots of questions and, uncertainty and, some great things to come out of this as well. More people receiving supports when they need it. But I want to hear a little bit about your role, Aged Care Specialist Officer. Like, that's a pretty big title. Tell us, what's a normal day look like for you, Daniel?
To simplify it, I'm there to try and help coordinate and piece everything together. We're talking 2 different government agencies. We're talking a couple of different teams who work within those government agencies, and it can get confusing for somebody. So a normal day for me is to tie it all together and present a path for that person or for that family who's come in to see me. So it's normally a 90-minute interview, 3 of them a day. Can be quite intensive.
So you've done some of these on the other side where you're doing the interview.
90-minute interview with
with the client.
Face-to-face. It's always face-to-face. So 2 different ways they can see us, face-to-face in an office, or video chat for those who can't get into an office or they need something a little bit more urgent and can't wait the time before they can get to see us.
Right. Okay. And in terms of preparation, because there'll be, some families or individuals who obviously have not gone through that stage, what are the type of things you look for in those interviews, or what things do they need to prepare for?
It depends on what stage they're at. It really does. So you can have the person who might be coming in for early stages. I'm starting to know some changes with my health as I get older. I want to plan for that and let my family know what they could do for me while I've got some control over it. Or it could be at the later stages where I've even had people who've come straight from hospital, their parents in there at the moment, they've been told they're not coming home. it can be varied from right in between those two big different areas.
And what are the common themes for people, like the most sort of common theme that you receive as an officer? What's the most common theme?
Probably
for
the most
people?
common theme is just understanding how much it's going to cost and then what they've actually got to do to get the care they want. So, for example, you could have somebody who's come in there who hasn't had any care needs and they're in their late 80s, for example. They come in to see me and they've worried about their wife or worried about their husband, or they're both worried about themselves. So they need to know, oh, what happens when I ring my aged care? It's a bit scary. I don't want somebody coming in there and taking over from me.
Yeah.
So it could be that. It's probably one of the most common themes, yes.
And do you work sort of alongside My Aged Care, or are you very separate to the My Aged Care?
No, we work alongside. I've got access to My Aged Care myself, so I need to also contact them if I have anything technical that I can't handle. It's kind of also tying in with Services Australia. So somebody comes in, they have a care need assessment that needs to get done. So that is My Aged Care needs. They look at your health concerns, what you need to help you stay at home for as long as you possibly can. And then Services Australia looks at the income and the assets assessment. So it's kind of to help somebody come to one person instead of going and talking to My Aged Care and finding out just about the care needs. And then they say, oh, you need to go off and get an income and asset assessment now. Then they're not sure where they need to go. So yeah, that's my role, is to try and help get everything done in the one place.
So is that done before they seek My Aged Care, or can it be done during, or is it after they've received approvals?
It can be done before. I can also do a referral if somebody hasn't even thought about getting a referral to get assessed. So My Aged Care will organise an assessment. They do a triage when you call them up. Their triage is to see whether you're eligible for an aged care service. So to be eligible for an aged care service, you need to be A, over 65 or over 50 if you're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, and B, you need to have care concerns that are of a level that you need some support either at home or in permanent aged care. So they'll look at that side of things, they'll triage that, then they'll organise for an assessor. An assessor will come out and see you to actually see in your own home, actually see what your needs are, what you need help with, and their focus is to help keep you at home. Right? They're not going to be focused on getting you into permanent aged care. That's the last thing that they want to do. They need to look at all your needs and help you stay there. Then once you have that assessment done, they'll then tell you, oh, you need to go out now and to see how much it's going to cost you. And that's where we can help plan for that too. Okay. So it could either be at that tail end of being assessed, how much it's going to cost, or it can be before. I might need this in the future, but I want to plan for it. So you can also come and see an aged care specialist officer and we can do what's called a record of interview.
And that is an important thing you mentioned then about people thinking, is this where it all ends? Do I end up going into care or into a nursing home or, under the system? When in fact it isn't. They want you to be at home. They want you to stay home longer. They want you to receive, the services that you need based on the assessment outcome.
Yep.
How much hand-holding do you do with the participant throughout the process?
Sometimes
a fair bit.
Sometimes, yes, some of them are quite a bit. Or if somebody needs really intensive help, then I'm going to be looking at other avenues in the community. So, for example, I once had a lady who was living in a home with her own home with another person who she used to be a partner with, and she was a little bit worried about a situation. She didn't have control of the finances at all. She didn't have much money in the bank. Her family wasn't really supporting her at all. So part of the process for me was twofold for her. One, I was looking at what she could afford, so whether she met the financial hardship provisions for somebody in aged care, and B, there's other community organisations such as Care Finders who are designed for those who are alone, aren't getting the help they need from carers or family. So I was able to help her get a referral off to one of those organisations, and we did a follow-up because I was quite concerned about this particular individual just to make sure everything was working out for her.
Yeah. And you mentioned Care Finder, and we actually do have a member from the Care Finder team who will be on the podcast very soon as well. So stay tuned for that one. But with the clients who need that extra support, because there's a lot of people out there that can navigate the process. They can navigate the communication and doing all their outreach themselves. But also there are some people who are absolutely conflicted with what's needed, what's required, what you're allowed to do, what you can't do. But it's nice to know that Services Australia can provide that additional supports to people helping to provide that navigation. What are some of the common questions that you get from participants, or probably the main concerns?
Probably one of the big ones is they're coming in to find out how much it's going to cost. So, for example, let's say we've got a couple who come in and they're on full age pension. They've been assessed for a supporter home. One of them's been assessed for a supporter home, and they just want to find out how much is it going to cost. So I go into an education first, see how much they actually know. So I apologise if they already know what I'm about to say, but I take it back to the basics just to make sure I haven't missed anything.
It's important.
Yeah, definitely. So I will go through what have you been assessed for? What level? So there's 8 levels at support at home now since 1 November. And for anybody who was assessed between 13th of September 24 through to the 31st of October 25, they might be on the 1 to 4 transition old home care package. So for those people, I go through and I say to them, okay, what have you been assessed for? Have you been assessed under these 3 categories? So when you get assessed as clinical, independence, or everyday living. For people who get assessed with mainly clinical, there's no cost. They don't pay anything out of their pocket. That comes out of the package they've been assessed for. For people who are assessed with independence needs, that'll come under a lower percentage of contribution. So for example, the person who I had in there who had a level 5 package, she was on full pension with her husband. They're only paying 5% under the independence out of their own pocket. So that's $100 per hour, for example. You're only paying $5. The rest of it comes out of your package. And then everyday living, that's the larger amount that you're going to contribute. That's stuff which you normally resource yourself. You have to get help gardening or cleaning, etc. So a person on full pension, that's 17.5%. So then we tie that together in our little record of interview and show them what that looks like on a fortnightly basis with their age pension. So they have their age pension come in, they might have investments in superannuation, might have money in the bank, and we'll tie all that together for them so they can see it physically in a fortnightly basis. They're budgeting per fortnight. What's it potentially going to cost you if you have this person come out this many times under this service? Have a look. We'll put it out there together for them.
So do you provide a bit of a quote for them so they can see?
Not a quote, it's an estimate, because we're not financial advisors. It's information that we're giving them. But basically what it looks like is we put the record of interview. This is the day you saw me. This is what the aged care specialist officer role is. This is what was pertinent to our discussion. So we'll put some information in there that's there. So they've got them on that one time they come in to see us. They've got that on that record of interview. And then we'll go into what we call scenarios. Could be one scenario, could be more. Those scenarios are the estimate. So we'll show on the basis, this is how much you got on the bank. This is how much you've got with your superannuation. This is how much age pension brings in. Boom, there's how much your income is. Then we'll go to the other side. This is your fee estimate. We'll show them how to do that fee estimate on the My Aged Care website. So if they want to play around with it later on or show family and they want to have a go at it, we teach them how to do that. Then we put the result of that down the bottom there of showing this is how much your cost is going to be per fortnight. This is how much income's coming in. That's what it potentially looks like for you.
And that's really important. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because there are some people that obviously can't work out what the impact is going to be financially for them. But being able to sort of get those numbers down. But even some of the clients I do speak to on a regular basis those that fall within the clinical category in terms of physio, podiatry, nutrition, for example, just explaining to them that there is a zero contribution for that. There are also questions around the basics like the gardening and the meal preparation or transport, for example. But you've explained that absolutely perfectly for people to navigate. They are really common questions, aren't they? And sometimes, people want to see a visual and they want to see, what the impact's going to be. Is that sort of what happens on a regular basis?
It's definitely a regular basis. Everybody's concerned about how much money they've got. Everybody's concerned how much it's going to cost to make sure they can help stay in their home. Definitely.
Now, there's probably people who are already listening thinking, I need one of those estimates. I need one of those appointments. I need one of those, because that's probably where they're most stuck with the process of navigating the My Aged Care journey. I will mention it is via the website and phone number 1-800-227-475. We'll post that out towards the end as well again. And
so
through
that
the website.
phone number, that phone number 1-800-227-475 is the Services Australia Income Assessment Team. They're called the Residential Care Assessment Team. They can book appointments with the aged care specialist officers. They can also, if you don't need an appointment, if you just need the means assessment done, that's their job. So if you're on a age pension or an income support payment, such as carer's payment or anything else, you can call that number and they can do it over the phone with you. So you don't need to actually fill out any forms. You do it over the phone, get it updated.
Fantastic.
If you're not on an income support payment, so for example, for a self-funded retiree, then you'll need to fill out one of the forms and they can help you make sure you get the right form. But there's basically two forms. Support a home. If you search the servicesaustralia.gov.au website for the code SA456, that'll bring up the cost of care for support a home, or the SA457, that'll bring up the cost of care for permanent aged care. Fill that out. You can lodge it yourself. You can do it online. If you've got a Centrelink account linked to your MyGov, you can actually do that claim form online as well.
Great.
Or you can upload it yourself, or any Centrelink office can upload it for you. They'll send it off to the correct team to be assessed.
Absolutely. Definitely nothing to be scared of, guys. It's a really great way of, getting all your little ducks in a row so you can work out if there is any contribution required for the particular services that you need. If there's someone at the very beginning who hasn't quite even navigated any of this and they're questioning whether they should start the My Aged Care journey, if someone is asking, how do I find information about accessing aged care services and what is an aged care specialist officer and how can you help them, what would you say?
Even before the aged care specialist officer level, if you want to just have a look at it yourself, feel a little bit more confident about it, the myagedcare.gov.au website is the perfect resource to start. On the very front page, there's three main tabs. The first tab is what you need help with, and it'll ask a radio button whether you're just looking into it, whether you need support home, etc., and it'll start guiding you through it. You can even get up to the point where it can actually give you some information on, for example, legal ramifications. And there's other government organisations that will refer you off to too if you need some help with, I need to plan because I know I've got this illness. I haven't told my family yet, but I want to research before I tell them. It can actually send you off to the right location so you can look at what you need to do to look after how you're cared for when it comes to that point. So you've still got while you've got control, the whole system's about your control that you've got. Anybody else is there to support you. So this gives you the power to actually find that information to get that support that you want.
Research is very important too, because there are people who can find that information and do all the research required alongside the services from Services Australia in order to see, the dollars and cents of that. Do you work closely with any other partners or other organisations to support the participant through the process?
Basically, we work within the government arena. We can't recommend any individual organisation or anything like that. It's same as any government. We've got to remain biased to it. But probably a better way to have a look at that answer is, say, for example, I call it going down the rabbit warren.
Yes.
You've been doing that research. You get lost. That's when you can go into any Centrelink office. You can call that 1-800-227-475 or even My Aged Care, 1-800-200-422. They'll help you get to the right person to actually get an appointment with us.
Excellent.
Any Centrelink staff member can book that appointment as well, but that's when we can start looking at areas for you and say, you went down there. Yeah, okay, I can see where you got lost. But from what you've told me, this is what you need to do. So say, for example, I have a person who's come in, they've got themselves stuck, they're really unsure where they're meant to go. They've got a few health issues, etc. I can help point them in the right direction of, it sounds like you need to get an assessment done. You got concerns about staying at home. You need some equipment. So the new changes means that when you get assessed, you need to be honest with that assessor. Tell them about the little niggly knee, how you can't bend over. Tell them about everything that's affecting you. And that assessor will have a look and say, you might need some equipment in the household. We need a handrail. We need a ramp put in. Instead of previous to 1 November, you had to save up your home care package fees to be able to pay for those kind of modifications. Now you can get assessed separately to that and get the funding instead of waiting for it to build up to pay for it. They'll assess you for that funding on a priority system, work out whether it's a high need or a low need, and you'll get that money, instead of saving for it, you get that money up front, as well as your support a home package as well.
We get a lot of questions about the AT and home modification funding, and there's a lot of people that were assessed for it. They don't realise they actually have that funding, but then upon speaking to the participant, out comes I have a bung knee, I've got mobility issues. It's like, well, you're aware you do have approvals for that. Looking in the portal, you've got the funding, it's ready to go. And they're actually not aware that they have been.
And even just delaying a little bit of their confusion, you get assessed you have to wait for the income to actually be allocated to you, that assessment to be allocated to you. When you get that letter, if you're assessed for support a home and assessed for, say, assistive technology or a home modification, you could get the allocated funding for one of those before the other one.
Correct.
And a lot of people are still confused by it all. So they come in and they go, oh, I've been assessed for support a home. And it's like, no, actually that says for your home modification. So what that means is that was a high priority. That's what we're focused on here.
Yes. And that comes up quite a bit.
Yep.
The funding is pending. It's in yellow.
Yep.
And the Home Mods AT is funding assigned. So you try to help them navigate that the best they can. Different types of aged care, Daniel. What are the different types of aged care?
So predominantly, we've got two different types of aged care: support at home and permanent aged care. Let's have a look at an example of somebody who might have moved through that whole journey. I'm actually going to use my pop for this.
Yeah.
He's currently an aged care and is 98. Still kicking on. One of the last World War II veterans in his area and country, New South Wales.
Oh, wow.
He's been doing pretty good, including a little stories, for example, where once my mum found a newspaper article where he got interviewed and said, I had a radiation burn from when I was at the Hiroshima cleanup. Mum was like, no, I think you told a bit of a pork pie there because you actually burnt your leg on the fence when you're welding it. But anyway, that's what happens when people, people like to change stories a little bit. But for him, his journey was he was in a town of less than 50 people. He ended up getting some home care support for himself. He had a little bit of dementia, and that gradually got worse with a few falls and so forth. And after a pretty major fall where he wasn't found for 2 nights, my mum finally got onto him, and we got him reassessed and put through for a in-town home care package. So mum physically moved him from the country location into a little bit more of a rural city. Then after probably not even 12 months, his dementia kicked in a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so she ended up having to get him reassessed after going through a hospital to be correctly diagnosed for dementia and then put into a permanent aged care, unfortunately. But he did pretty good. That was only just recently, probably been in aged care for about 18 months now for permanent aged care. So he got up to about 96 before it happened.
Wow.
But for him, that journey started from home care and seeing what they could get in the rural area. People coming out to the home, help with cleaning, people coming out to make sure his nutrition was up, etc., making sure he had the right stuff to hang on to in the showers and everything else.
And you mentioned rural, obviously rural versus regional and metro, Melbourne. In terms of the service delivery and what Services Australia provide, is there a different angle that you take from Services Australia to accommodate for those people?
So basically, in my position, there's 70 of us who work in aged care specialist offices who work in offices, and there's 11 of us who work remotely. However, it doesn't mean you have to go into a Centrelink office to see one of us. We also do video chats. So when you're in that same number, you can also get put through for a video chat service if you've got the ability to do that, or a family member's got the ability to do that through their MyGov account. And we can do the interview in your own comfort of your own home as well. So we definitely look at that for help for people who are remote and can't get into a Centrelink office.
Yeah. And that's the thing. There's people who love the face-to-face interaction by coming in and speaking to someone face-to-face. And I know you mentioned you can schedule that face-to-face appointment, but yeah, being able to, like, having technology at our fingertips now, we can actually do the whole virtual online meeting with participants. It was a great story. If people are thinking, there's so many steps to this, there are just too many steps to navigate. Obviously, we will want people to, start somewhere and then build towards, having that assessment and then working on the income and assets outcome. If you had to explain from the Services Australia perspective, what are the steps for applying for the government assistance for aged care?
Yep. So you can start through step 1, myagedcare.gov.au. Have a look and see what services you're after. You can request an online assessment to see what your care needs are with them. It'll also step you through whether you then need to go off and get an income and asset assessment. So step 1, get an assessment for your care needs. Step 2, how much is it going to cost you? Step 3, finding a provider. So support a home, let's have a look at a couple who come in. They've been assessed. They know they've got a support a home package coming up. They want to know how much it's going to cost. So step 2 becomes a little bit complex for them. Come in and talk to one of us. We can sit down and go through that step 2 of how much it's going to cost. when to do that means assessment. And by what I mean by that is you've got to wait for the funding to be allocated. Service Australia can do your income and asset assessment. It's called a pre-entry letter and it's valid for 120 days or 4 months. So if you're still waiting for your funding to be allocated, that could expire. So timing can be critical. And we can try and help play with that so you don't have to do another assessment later on down the track. So we can help create a little bit of a dot point, what's prioritised for you specifically. But ultimately, that's one of the main steps is get it assessed, get the income and asset assessment done. Once you've got your prioritisation letter, you need to find a provider. That's also through the My Aged Care website. You can research that a lot as well. You can also get a little bit of information from people you know who've been through the system.
And that is like personal experience for people.
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth is the key with a lot of people. And then their own personal experiences with, either providers or, the service delivery suppliers, if they choose to become self-managed. Everyone has a different story and a different experience.
And you can always then tie that that personal experience, if you learnt from somebody else, back to the My Aged Care website and have a look because it's all through the government. There's regulations and there's reports on how well each provider does, and you can find that information as well yourself to back yourself up through the My Aged Care website.
Yeah. And this is the thing with, navigating that, but also getting to the pointy end of the assessment or finding the provider and then working on the costs of things, as you mentioned. It is the co-contribution is the main point of the discussion in terms of whether people wish to, what services they want, how much it will cost them. Does Services Australia allow for, clients who are in hardship or anything along those lines who experience hardship?
So you mean for how much they actually contribute because of the hardship?
Yes.
Yep. So definitely. Like we mentioned earlier on today, we had that hardship example of a lady who didn't have the amount of assets that we have our asset limit on, 46,883 off the top of my head, I think it is, since 20th of March when our CPI rate of age pension went up.
Yeah.
That changes that amount. When age pension goes up, it's tied to it through a little formula that we do. Once you hit that asset limit and you want to apply for hardship, definitely we can have a look at it. It may pay for, reduce your cost by a little bit depending on how much your immediate costs are. We look at essentials, how much you've got to pay for medication, how much you've got to pay for rates, how much you've got to pay for your rent, whatever happens to be for your situation. We'll look at that and we could potentially end up having the government support you and subsidise you for all the costs depending on what your personal experiences are and your personal situation is.
So they can actually work on that prior while they're still waiting for to come off the wait list for their package.
We do it as a pre-entry as well. So if you do a pre-entry means assessment and a pre-entry hardship assessment, definitely. If you think you're coming into a situation like that, that's one of the things where we sit in when it comes a little bit complex. It's not the run of the mill where you can find a result online. That's probably a good idea to say, I might need to talk to this person. Sometimes you may not be thinking, I don't want to put any pressure on that person. I don't know whether I should do that. You can talk to any service officer within Centrelink and they can give you basic information and they may suggest when it becomes a little bit more outside of what they're, because they're across everything, but they might be able to say, I think you need to talk to an aged care specialist officer. We've talked to you about the basics here, but how about we book you an appointment to yours a little bit more complex and we'll get some more specific information for you.
And that's really important because some of the conversations that I have with our participants and the new inquiries that come in are around that questionable hardship versus income and assets, or they're actually not even aware that they need to do an income and assets test.
Yep.
But also receiving that formal notification that your contribution percentage is XYZ.
Yep.
That's kind of where they feel stuck. But I find, personally, my experience with a lot of participants who are contemplating relinquishing their package altogether because of the hardship and because of the co-contribution. So, my advice to them is, don't make a rash decision straight away and just reevaluate your position and reach out to the professional services to get that guidance.
And also consider which bits you need help with that come under the package which might benefit you and which bits you might be able to fund privately.
Yes. Yeah, because then that's the people I mentioned about physio and podiatry, and that's all they want.
But that's 0% contribution.
Yes.
If you're going into everyday living, you're fully self-funded retiree, you could be up to an 80% contribution.
Yes.
For everyday living.
And that's, just to get the
so we can help we can help direct how much each of those 3 areas are, refer you to a printout so you can fully understand what those 3 areas are, because the health department controls the Aged Care Act. There's a piece of information you can get off the health.gov.au website called the Support at Home Service List.
Yep.
That details each of the 3 areas, that details each of what main categories there are and what's in scope and what's out of scope. For example, for allied health type services under clinical, you'll see an in scope and you'll see an out of scope for those ones, and you can drill it down to what you need to get done.
And that's a really great piece of information, a good resource as well. I know we use that in the office a lot of the time. It's a great Bible to have, but you also want to make sure it's factual information and it's also truth, because, you know, there are people that speak along the grapevine and it's hearsay information, but, you know, we do need to work to the government guidelines and the requirements of the Aged Care Act and through My Aged Care. People listening today, there might be some people who are sort of, you know, planning for retirement and, you know, have some superannuation and just making those choices, you know, and then coming up to the age pension, or one is on the age pension and one's not. Is there any information you can share for people in that situation?
Definitely. When you have a wealth of assets behind you or income behind you, you're going to create a will because you want to see how your estate's going to be established to all your loved ones and friends or whatever. You can come in and get an assessment done or an estimate done by us under a record of interview. That's like a life will. This is your plan, why you've got control over it, where you want it to go through to. You might have 3 children. 2 of them are definitely going to be on board. 1 of them's not. You could come in and tell us what your income and assets are. Say what you think your needs are going to be in the future. Can you give me an estimate based off this? And that can be part of your plan that you're putting together. That's part of the information. So for example, we've got somebody who might be thinking, yep, I'm at support at home, been working quite well. I'm starting to decline a little bit, or I'm a little bit worried about my wife, a little bit worried about my husband. What would happen if they went into permanent aged care? That's another part of what we can go through to. Totally different way that we look at cost of contribution when you go into permanent aged care, and then we can help show you what the difference is between the 2 of them and how it actually looks.
Fantastic.
There is a common theme out there when you go into permanent aged care. You've got to pay for this 4 main costs. You've got basic daily fee, 85% of the maximum rate of single age pension. You've got a means tested component, which is based on your income and assets, how much you might be expected to contribute towards your cost of your care. The 3rd one is a room cost. That's normally the big one. You go into permanent aged care, you've got to buy a room. And the 4th one's extras. Anything that's not subsidised by the government that helps produce, you know, higher rate of quality of life for you in aged care, that's what you might want to look at for that. So we can help you work out, everybody tells me I've got to sell my home to go into permanent aged care. It's not a fact. Everybody's situation is totally different, and it's a good idea to come in and have a look at what happens if I do sell it? What happens if I don't sell it? What if we did this? That kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff we can talk about, scenarios. Get the facts printed out for your particular situation so everybody knows where you're at. It's able to communicate.
It is, and it is hearsay because people say that at exactly the same thing. Yep, we're going to have to sell the house to put mum into care.
Yep.
You know, and sometimes it's not the case. And I was going to ask. I'm glad you touched on that in terms of people who have those, you know, those financial investments. You know, are there risks and returns or the types of things for people who have other properties?
Let's talk about 2 examples. We'll talk about somebody who doesn't have other properties, just got their own home. And the second example, I'll go into somebody with a holiday home, just to help highlight that a little bit. I have had a couple who have come in who are predominantly on age pension, got a bit of superannuation behind them, a little bit of money in the bank. We can't give information on how to invest, but we can say if you did this or if you did that, or you ask a question of me, if you do this is how it impacts on your rate of age pension, and this is how it impacts on that potential cost of care if you were to go into permanent aged care. And we can kind of tie it in a little bit with like the room costs I mentioned earlier, it's either a lump sum or you can pay a daily rate on that room cost. And we can help work out if you pay that daily rate, does it work out better if you keep your investment as it is now? Or if you pay for the room, does that work out better for you? And that's one of the things we can show on a fortnightly basis and how long your money would last for. So let's say somebody comes in, they've got $500,000 in super combined between the couple. They're predominantly on the maximum rate of age pension and they own their own home. When one person goes into permanent aged care, the home doesn't come into the equation. the remaining person in that relationship is protected. So that home won't be counted as an asset while you stay in your aged care room. What I mean by that, if the other person goes into aged care and then you move beds, you lose that protection on the home and you'll get reassessed as the first person. So that's kind of the thing we can talk about with scenarios. Sometimes people go, "Ooh, I want to go in on exactly the same day as my partner." Great idea. But if you go in on a separate day, what does that look like for you guys? Might be different, may benefit, may not benefit, but that's part of the reason why you need to just, you go to buy a car, you can do some research.
Yeah.
Okay, what brand do I want to get? Do I want to get an EV now with the petrol costs going up? This is a bigger cost. You're going into permanent aged care, it's like buying another home. You need to work out, hey, how much does that room cost versus this room? What if I fund it from here? That's the kind of questions you come in and tell us that you got. We can run that through and show you what it looks like.
That's absolutely critical information because, as we mentioned, people hear what other people tell them, but actually hearing it directly from Services Australia can actually really help ease any of the concerns, but also iron out any of the questions they might have around that, because there are a lot of questions around that process if they're moving into aged care, if they're receiving great services. I actually had a couple of people say, I want aged care, but I also like the services I'm getting, or going into, retirement village or, continuing the services in there. So everyone's situation seems to be unique, isn't it?
Yep. And that's why I call it going down the rabbit warren. Somebody says, "Oh, I did this," and you're going to start doing that research, but your situation's quite different to that person who told you. You try going down that path, and then you can't work out where to get out, which is actually pertinent to you.
Exactly. I think there might be some younger people probably listening as well, thinking, "What do I need to do to, either manage my money, or what are the options I can use to make sure I sort of either don't end up in that situation, or what can I do now to sort of mitigate any issues happening in the future?"
That alludes to another service Australia does, financial information service officers. They're there from anybody, whether you're in school still, just to educate you on how finances work and etc., through to somebody who's actually in retirement and what they're planning on doing some big changes and how that might impact them. So that's another option as well. Financial information service can also do a little bit on the cost of care scenarios, but they're not in depth about the access to aged care. To get onto a financial information officer, that's through any phone line into Services Australia. Doesn't matter whether it's the aged care line on 132 300, if I remembered that correctly.
Yep.
Or any of the other numbers, whether it's families line, job seeker line, disability line, etc. When you first call up and ask for your Centrelink reference number, and then the computer's going to ask you, "What are you calling up for today?" And you state financial information service. It'll put you in the queue for the financial information officers, who can then help you with what your queries are to help you educate you better.
Excellent. And obviously the podcast is, aged care and disability, and we've shedded the light on a lot of the aged care specific stuff, and you're an aged care specialist. But in terms of disability, do you have any information on what people can go to for Services Australia if they are on NDIS or on any disability support pensions, maybe?
Yep. So for anybody like that, you need to talk to people who are really good at that kind of information. So you can get some general information from any service officer within a Centrelink office, and they've got the ability to talk to specialists. So if you're stuck on any query, you've got a point of call face-to-face, or you got the phone line for the disability support pension line through to Services Australia.
The most important thing, you did mention the FIS, the Financial Information Services, and I'm just looking at the flyer you kindly shared. Like, they're not financial planners. They don't tell you how to invest. They don't do any of those things, but they can provide that explanation around, wages and salary, super, budgeting, education. Yeah, which is absolutely in very, very important.
Even just to point you in some good resources such as moneysmart.org.au, which is a government website to help educate you about anything to do with investments, like research annuities, research term deposits, what they all mean, what to look out for, capital gains tax, all that kind of stuff. Money Smart's a good resource. Yeah.
Look, money does make people a little bit nervous when they're having those conversations, but there is nothing to be scared about. And this is why we have these services, these great services. It's been great information, Daniel. Very knowledgeable.
Thanks.
Is this your full-time role in the space of aged care officer, specialist officer?
Yeah, I've been doing it for almost 2 years, but I started with Service Australia just over 30 years ago, roughly, actually. Done quite a few different roles. So
Yeah. Do Do you tend to sort of catch up with any of the other officers around the country or interstate and share the knowledge and educate?
As aged care specialist officers and the Financial Information Service, we all work together in one team. So we do get together quite regularly to work on whatever's happening at the moment or future plan and so forth. So definitely we get to chat about what's going on and help improve any queries that people have got, etc. Yeah, definitely.
I want to know about Daniel the person, your biggest inspiration in life, because you'd have some sort of inspiration or something that is driving you to do the work that you do in the community. You've got a story to share about your dad.
Yes. My father was a paraplegic, had his accident a month before I turned 3. He ended up becoming paraplegic from that accident, lost his best mate in it. Like anybody who's gone through a life of changing event, I've found a lot of people from my experience since I was very early on in age, they'll either go one side or they'll go the other side of the fence. They never really sit on the fence. Every day that they've survived after that, they're grateful for, or they think the world owes them, along that kind of line. Being involved with wheelchair sport, my father got involved with a good group of people and he almost went the wrong way at one point. My mum took him out of that, got some people to talk to him and mentor him, and then he's ended up getting involved into a lot of wheelchair sport. He represented Victoria in athletics, ended up representing Australia in athletics and then wheelchair basketball. 3 Paralympics he's done.
That's remarkable. Paralympics.
Yeah. So
flying the flag for Australia.
His third and last one was the 2000 Sydney Olympics, Paralympics. And he'd remarried and had twins at that point who were about 18 months old. Even when he was in full-time training and a full-time job, he'd still get up in the morning, 3-4, go for his ride on the wheelchair bike that they've got, come back home, help his wife with the babies. Then he'd go out and do swimming. Then he'd come back and help with the last thing before he went off and worked. And it's just like, if he can get up and do that kind of stuff, if I'm having a generally a bad day, it's like, no, hang on. I can be a little bit better than this.
Yes. How much inspiration does that give you to do the work you do for Services Australia?
A lot. It's, this particular role, probably because I've grown up in that kind of environment all my life, etc., with basketball and so forth. I've seen people with many different illnesses and injuries. And when you see people come in, I think I've just learned how to listen and get some empathy and just help out in any kind of situation. You can learn those skills. And yeah, I think it definitely has helped a lot.
Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for sharing the incredible information around the services that Services Australia provide. A big shout out to your team as well, Fifi and Christiane as well for providing this opportunity. But Daniel, it's been an absolute pleasure welcoming you.
Thank you, Brian.
To the podcast. That's been Daniel from Services Australia, Aged Care Specialist Officer, and providing that much needed service to our community to help support them navigate through the My Aged Care journey. This has been Outreach. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. We hope you've enjoyed it. It is a show dedicated to aged care, disability, and the power of community connection. If you want to reach out to Services Australia or you want one of those interviews or appointments, reach out on 1-800-227-475. Or if you are navigating through My Aged Care or wishing to start the journey, it's 1-800-200-422. Book yourself an income and assets test through Services Australia and they will get you on your way. If you want to get in touch on the social media, we are all over it. It is Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. That is an absolute mouthful. Outreach is thanks to Gratitude Home Care and I Help Disability Services. If you want to share your story and you want to end up sitting right here opposite me on the desk, it is brian@gihc.com.au and marcus@ihds.com.au. We'll catch up with you same time next week. You've been listening to Outreach on Westsider Radio.